Hello, my name is Gerdes. I'm a professor that tries to help you understand context in the war in Ukraine. Every Monday, sometimes on Tuesday, sometimes on Sunday, but usually on Monday, I go through the articles that I thought were important over the course of the previous week, and that helps you understand. I just read the title and I tell you, maybe some context about it. Some speak for themselves, but many I add a little bit on. So I'll go over about 50, 60 articles here very quickly and just kind of give you a sense of what happened over the last week. Every week seems to have its own personality, just like a person does or a class does. And this week, it was really the dueling narratives. But we didn't get to that until the Time article and the Economist article. So here we go with Monday, October 30th. The first article here is Putin blames the West, Ukraine, after a mob storms the Russian airport to catch Jews. You remember the mob trying to, when a plane from Israel was landing in a largely Muslim part of Russia, there was a mob there. They were breaking things and they were saying that they were going to kill these Jews that were here. And Putin was blaming the West. Yeah. Biden wasn't having it, and he said so much after that. Okay, back in the United States, McConnell and Speaker Johnson are headed for a showdown clash over Ukraine, and McConnell in another article says that he's going to go all out as Ukraine fight fractures the GOP. I think McConnell is actually in a very important place. As the minority leader in the Senate, he and Schumer can pretty much block anything in the House that they want to. Schumer can do it all alone, but McConnell's extra force will help back down the House of Representatives and force them to kind of do something for Ukraine. McConnell's going to spend his political capital here. He's in his last term, and I think he knows it. He's pretty old, and he's going to retire, and he's going to go out and make this part of his legacy. That's my view of this. Okay, Ukraine says that its day of combined attacks damaged Russian strategic air defense facility in Crimea, and so they're trading blows back and forth, but this wasn't a huge one, but it was something. Putin dismissed a commander who allowed raids across the Dnipro. That one caught my attention because you don't generally dismiss a commander unless you're dissatisfied, and they're getting a beachhead on the other side. The Ukrainians are getting a beachhead on the other side of the Dnipro, and Putin wants to do something about that. There was a Ukrainian diplomat who said that the rose and candy stage with the West is over. They really have to show that they're producing something now, and I think that's a pretty fair assessment with where we're going. Ukraine says its day of combined attacks damaged a strategic air defense facility. This was another article like the one we talked about before. And then finally in RT, aides believe that Zelinsky is delusional, according to Time. Well, that's before the Time article came out. So how RT got a hold of that day before, I don't understand. Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween. The U.S. dismisses Putin's claim that the West was behind Dagestan anti-Semitic riots. It wasn't us, it was you. Like, stop trying to pin that stuff on us. The Chechen president Kadyrov orders police to shoot protesters in the head. Like, he actually said this, like, fire 2 warning shots and then shoot them in the head on the third. Or like, okay. And then the leader of the region about the airport rioters, he says, well, they can pay for their crimes by being sent to the front. If they want to kill people, they can go kill these Nazis. Well, it was bizarre because, wait, you want to go kill Nazis, but they actually wanted to kill Jews. So are they really Nazis or are they not? That hurt my head. Russian soldiers accused of killing a family of 9 in Ukraine. Now, I didn't talk about this at all last week, but it's really important. This was the first time, I think, and I'm going to read a little quote from it. 2 Russian soldiers have been arrested on suspicion of killing a family of 9, including 2 young children, in their home in the Russian-occupied eastern Ukrainian town of Volnovka. Okay, now this is the first known case of Russia actually arresting Russian soldiers for some kind of war crime. The first known case. It might have happened before, but I haven't seen it, and I pay really close attention. Russia has tightened capital controls to help prop up the ruble, says a report, and the ruble is actually looking a little up, but that's because they're monkeying with the system in weird ways. Like, so Joe Blogs has done a really good job of tracking this, and so watch his videos. But one of the things that they're doing, for example, is like, it's not a law. Like, you can get your money in other denominations, but it'll take longer or be a harder process or that kind of thing. And so they're trying to keep the money in. Nobody really wants rubles at this point because they don't trust the system. Okay, Russia losses past 300,000 according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and that was on Tuesday. That was a big day. That was quite a milestone. If you compare that to like losses in Afghanistan, we're not even in the same. It's not that we're outside the ballpark, we're not even playing the same sport. Okay, Wednesday, November 1st. Ukraine reports the most extensive Russian shelling of its settlements so far this year. Like, that's saying a lot. The most extensive shelling in all of 2023. Forbes had an interesting article about how Ukrainian Marines almost wasted their first batch of French AMX-10RC scout vehicles, and now they're getting a second batch. And what happened, I'm going to quote this, and then I'll try to explain it a little bit. Quote, when brigade assaulted Russian positions in Vilkanovskaya on June 5th, officers placed the AMX-10RCs at the front of the assault columns. Now, they're armored, but they're not heavily armored. They're just to try to get, like, troops in and out. And they attempted a direct assault on Russian fortifications. It was a role the officers should have reserved solely for the Marine Corps T-80 tanks. What happened next was terrible and entirely predictable. At least 2 and perhaps as many as 5 of the AMX-10RCs were immobilized or destroyed. Russian forces captured one of the immobilized vehicles. At least one 4-person AMX-10RC crew died. Okay, so, they weren't using the tech correctly. And generally speaking, the Ukrainians are very, very talented at employing these things, but it was predictable and they didn't follow appropriate doctrine for using these kind of vehicles. It shouldn't have been used in this way. They're getting more. Hopefully they won't repeat that. This is the kind of thing where every error that you make is going to cost lives. Okay, Ukraine's Air Force has a big kamikaze drone problem. This is another article where they were talking about kamikaze drones hitting Ukrainian airplanes. Like this, it works both ways. Like, we highlight certain things, but it's happening to Ukraine just like it's happening to Russia, and it's pretty sad to see. SBU confirms info about searches in reception office of MP in case of transfer of men of military age abroad. So there is a member of parliament who is apparently on the take, it looks like, trying to transfer people out of the country, get paid off and get them out of the country safe so that they can not have to, report to battle. According to the investigation, the member of parliament organized an illegal mechanism and used controlled public organization to bring the right people into the Shikila system. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. So, through it, allegedly as volunteers. It documented that he managed to illegally smuggle his common-law wife's brother abroad, the report says. So that's bad. They were working on a bill to make corruption during wartime treasonous, and that would be a good way to help tamp down on this kind of thing. Okay, this is another article, Ukrainians name corruption, low incomes as the main problems according to the KIIS survey. That's the Kyiv Institute survey. Their polling is pretty respectable, and Ukrainians know that corruption is an issue that they really need to stamp out. They're working at it. It's not going to happen overnight. It's taking time, but it's also giving their enemies abroad, the people who want to side with Russia or side against Ukraine, either way, those people more ammunition to say, well, why are we funding them when they're that corrupt, right? So it's a danger. It's a real danger. Tiredness on all sides over the war in Ukraine. The Italian prime minister tells a prank caller. So a prank caller calls the Italian prime minister pretending to be, I think it was like the head of the African Union or somebody high up in the African Union. And she tells him, look, we're tired. We have some solutions to hopefully, bring this to resolution, but the time's not right. She didn't know she was being pranked. And so another chink in the armor of the unity that is supposed to be in Europe. And Putin knows this, and he's working at creating as many chinks in that armor as possible. Russia can never beat a unified long-term, unified and really behind Ukraine, Europe, North America. If that bloc is united, he doesn't have a chance. But to the degree that he can fracture it, he has more and more of a chance. Okay, here's the big article of the day. It's on Wednesday. Time says the article was in Time. It was by an author named Simon Schuster. who turns out wasn't like, he's not really a big fan of Zelinsky, and he quoted an anonymous source who was Zelensky's biggest rival. I did a whole video about that. Actually, I did 2 videos about that, so you want to go check that out. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Inside, Volodymyr Zelinsky's struggle to keep Ukraine in the fight, and it really kind of paints with a negative brush. Now, there's some things in there that I look at and I go, wow, like, okay, I see what they're saying, and it's kind of fair, but it's kind of going to be twisted. And you can see that it was going to be twisted. And then in RT and TASS and Pravda, you saw it being twisted. And in the repeaters that are, Americans and Europeans that want to repeat those kind of things, it was twisted. Okay, so it paints Zelinsky as if he's somehow like just not in touch with reality, and he's just, we're gonna win no matter what. But you have to be, you can't send mixed messages. If you're Zelinsky, you have to be focused on, we are going to win, we are going to win, we are going to win, let's win, right? If you do otherwise, well, I don't know, like, you're going to send a terrible message and it'll ripple through society, and you can't do that. Zelensky's former advisor, Arestovich, to stand in future elections. Now, he's the guy that was quoted in that article, it turns out, saying bad things about Zelinsky, and, well, now you know why. Okay, The Economist magazine also had an article, so there were these dueling narratives here. Ukraine's commander-in-chief on the breakthrough that he needs to beat Russia. It was talking about Zalinsky. Hopefully I'm saying that better than Zaluni. By the way, the reason that I say Zaluni is because I put my news onto my phone, right? And then I listen to articles, and the way it's pronounced is all wrong, and then I repeat that. I'm sorry about it. Zaluzhny. I hope I said that right. Okay. And Zaluzhny was talking about how there's potential for stalemate here if we're not careful. We need some kind of breakthrough technology in order to get further than we are. Both sides can see each other, and so that became something that was, all the worst pieces were repeated as well. Although the Economist article was actually pretty fair, where the Time magazine article really wasn't. Okay, Thursday, November 2nd, RT talks about Ukraine's top general admits that Russia has the advantage. That's what I'm talking about, the twisting. There was another article in Politico about how North Korea is sending Putin tons of ammo, and Europe can't do the same for Ukraine. Now, Europe can do the same. They just don't have the political will. They've only sent 230 some odd thousand shells of the 1 million that were promised, according to, I think it was the Prime Minister of Lithuania. I'm not sure who it was, but they've sent, let's say, 30% of the shells, not even, that was supposed to go to Ukraine. They haven't done it. Now, part of this is that the way that the law or the request or whatever was written was that you can only source from the EU. You can't source from outside the EU. So that's like a protectionist racket within that. And I understand why you're doing that, but, maybe you want to do that kind of thing later. Right now, just get them the ammunition that they need. Okay. He called to set the Kremlin on fire. A theater director was accused of terrorism for a chewing gum wrapper. Okay, so this guy's arrested because on a chewing gum wrapper, he wrote a "love is ... and it has a man and a woman with their backs to the, and you see the man and the woman's back, and they're watching the Kremlin on fire. And so this was taken in Russia as treason, and he went to jail for that. Think about that. For a chewing gum wrapper that shows the Kremlin on fire. Okay. Red flag. Soviet symbols return to Russia's military. I've been saying this for a while now, but I think, Russia is really re-Sovietizing, not in communist ideology, but in authoritarianism. And they're looking back to that as a glory time. And that's a really dangerous thing for them to be doing. Okay, Friday, November 3rd, Russia's biggest drone strike in weeks hits Ukrainian infrastructure. Then you also had an article about how Ukrainian troops defend a vital foothold in the Russian-controlled Dnipro River. Okay, so that the Dnipro foothold is really important. If they can get enough men and material across to actually establish a beachhead and actually get, something going there, that could be the breakthrough that they're looking for, and that's why Putin was relieving the commander that was there. Okay, Putin outlines Russia's key and fateful purpose. Putin has been on this very strange historical revisionism tour, and I've seen this in multiple clips, and this article here, where he's just trying to explain that, no, this is really Russian land, this is ours, and that kind of thing. Okay, quote from the article, quote, attempts to sow the seeds of hostility and xenophobia in Russia are doomed to failure, Putin noted. All residents of the country are one single people, bound by a common history, as well as brotherly ties of friendship and mutual understanding. Well, tell the Ukrainians that, because this doesn't look all that brotherly to me. And what they're doing to Ukraine is forcing them to submit, forcing them to come under their heel, not to be brotherly. Okay, another article, I think I'm going to do one about this. Russians think Black Friday is a scam, according to a survey. I think I might just do that because their Black Friday is coming up really soon. It's not the day after Thanksgiving. They don't do that, but they do have a Black Friday. Ukraine troops defend vital foothold on the Russian-controlled Dnipro. Russia's biggest drone strike in weeks hits Ukrainian infrastructure, and I'm telling you, they have to be really careful about that because Ukraine was caught off guard somewhat by that last year, and once they figured out what was going to happen, they didn't have enough ways to defend. Now they're able to defend it to a much better degree, but they're also going to be able to strike back. And if Russia does this to their infrastructure, I think Ukraine's going to hit back at Russian infrastructure. And that's going to cause some significant escalation. In my last video, I talked about how they're working on long-range drones that can strike 1,000 miles into 1,000 kilometers away. That's well past Moscow. They can hit pretty much anywhere, or with these drones, they'll be able to hit anywhere in the west of Russia, pretty much, until you get way too up into the Arctic. And that's going to change the game significantly, and that's how they're going to play the game, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, Ukraine says buildings on fire in Kharkiv after biggest Russian drone strike in weeks. Zalinsky talks about how we will not abandon our people and occupy territories, and he needs to keep beating those drums. He needs to stay on message and keep doing that and not get off that message. And last article on Friday was mud, mice, and misery. Ukraine's forces prepare for another winter in the trenches. And it's coming. And honestly, I don't know if we're going to be out of it by this time next year. I mean, at Christmas or New Year's, I was talking about this, and I said, I don't think we're going to be done by this time next year. And I hate to say that, but that's what it really looks like. And I'm somewhat pessimistic that we're going to be done with this time next year. Okay. Saturday, November 4th, Ukraine files criminal charges against the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. In absentia, Kirill is charged with aiding and abetting with this, and there's more to it, and I'm not saying it properly. There's more to the charge, but yeah, that actually happened. And separation of church and state. Now, it's not that. He's actually supporting, giving aid to the Russian government and blessing it. Deadly Russian strikes hit Ukraine regions after EU's official visit. The Ukraine targets is a shipyard in Kerch. So both things were happening on Saturday. So the deadly Russian strikes. So whenever there's a big visit and Putin wants to overshadow whatever the talk is, there's these big strikes. There's nothing new to that. The other one is big, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. There's another article that the SBU notifies an MP, Dubinsky, of suspicion under case of transfer of military-aged men abroad. We were talking about that earlier. That kind of corruption just has to get stamped out. Zelinsky denies the U.S. and Europe are pushing for peace talks. So because of the Time article, there's been more and more conversation about how, well, they better have peace talks, they better surrender, and Zelinsky has to push back on that narrative with all his might. Zelinsky denies that the U.S. go ahead and just said that. Zelinsky talks about how there's no stalemate at the front today. So this is on the back of Zaluzhny's article as well, where he's got to say, look, there's not a stalemate. And again, on the ground, it's really hard to get through for either side, but they have to change the dynamics of the war. So they've started to do that. Continued support for Ukraine will cost the West less than letting Putin in is one article in The Guardian just talking about, like, look, what's the alternative? Have peace and then let Putin go back and recharge for 3 years and then come back again? Or do you want to just get this over with? Ukraine says that it struck a shipyard in Russian annexed Crimea. Did I think 4 videos about that. One was when it first happened. I just paused what I was doing and just took a quick to update and made sure that first this really did happen. And so it looks like the ship Askold, it was a missile launcher. It can launch caliber missiles and other things. It was struck, and it looks like it was damaged beyond, like it'll be probably a total loss. That's what we think has happened, and it's clear that the ship was hit. Now, there were 15 missiles, according to the Russians, that were shot at it. I don't know that all 15 were scalp. I think there were a few scalps and a bunch of decoys, but I even did a cost-benefit analysis to show that. Thank you for all your comments and interest in that. And okay, Sunday. So that was the big story on Saturday. On Sunday, Ukrainian Air Force commanders confirmed the destruction of the warship in Kerch. So it was close to the Kerch Bridge, but it was in a like a little port area. The upside of that, and when I did the cost-benefit analysis, some people said, yeah, as a business professor, you should have looked at the future, missiles being sent. I should have. I really should have. But somebody else said something interesting, that like they can't use that shipyard to build ships anymore because now they have to defend it. That's also another benefit of that as well. And good on the few of you that said that. Ukrainian defense chief orders a probe of a deadly Russian attack on military award ceremony. This was horrible. They were way too close to the front, where they gathered a bunch of soldiers, and the Russians could see, and we know that the Russians could see, and they, with some kind of rocket, hit that. At least 20 soldiers are dead, probably more at this point, and they got to not do that. That was an unforced error, and it's easy to say from the high seats where I am, but they really can't afford to do that kind of thing. Okay, Zelinsky says Ukraine is changing tactics and it will strike Russia unexpectedly to prevent a stalemate. It will, and it's going to keep doing that, and it's going to be hitting inside Russian territory. Go back to my very last video and I talk about that. Tensions grow in Kyiv over the status of the war. Zelinsky insists that the conflict with Russia is not a stalemate, and he's got to fight back against that narrative as well. Then I thought this one was really interesting, and this is the last one that I'll talk about. Zelinsky asked for more U.S. aid and invites Trump to Ukraine. That's an interesting move. Yeah, let Trump go over there and see with his own eyes what's going on. If it changes the narrative, that might be pretty significant. Worst case scenario, he doubles down and says the same thing he's doing, but wow. Okay, here's a quote. If Trump can come here, I will need 24 minutes to explain to President Trump that he can't manage this war, Zelinsky said. He can't bring peace because of Putin. Now, Trump likes to think of himself as a deal maker, but I think if he got to actually see what was going on the ground, it would be quite a different experience for him. Okay, that's it. That's the week's review. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares enough to listen to me to this point. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for the coffees. I really appreciate the encouragement. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.